Hiya, I'm Bruce Fumi. I once did a stand-up show somewhere in the Highlands, and one of the other performers walked on stage and said it's great to come to the real Scotland. Now, to be fair, the guy was from Glasgow and they don't get out much. But today, I thought I'd bring you to what is the real heart of Scotland. And it's here. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right at any time during this video and click the notification bell to make sure that you're informed of my new videos. In the meantime, let me tell you the story of Scotland's birth. Now this is the heart of Scotland, and I'll tell you why. But first, let me help you to find your bearings, okay? Now, behind me is a wide open valley that we Scots call a strath, and through it runs the River Erne. Now, on the other side of the Strathearn Valley, there's a road that climbs the Cairney Braes and over towards Perth. That's the A9, and most people watching this will have travelled that road at some point. It's the road that takes you from Dunblane all the way up past Inverness to Thurso. It's a road along which much of the Jacobite history of the 17th and 18th centuries took place. In fact, I talk about it in my video, The Jacobite Road. If you're eagle-eyed, you might just be able to pick out cars in the distance. After the Cairney Braes, the road then descends into Perth, and just north of that is Dunkeld. Dunkeld's where I filmed Columba, the monk who made Scotland. You should really watch that in conjunction with this, and I'll leave a link at the end. Now, the village below me on this side is Dunning. Now, there are lots of towns and villages in Scotland that begin with Dun. Obviously, Dunkeld and Dunning, but you can also add to that Dundee, Dumbarton, Dunecht, Dunbar, and loads more. Dun is a Gaelic word for a fort, so it's fair to assume that most of these towns grew up around forts of some description. The Gaelic word for church is kill. So Kilmarnock, Kilwinning, Kilburney, Kilsyth, Killin. A field, Acha, gives us Auchtermuchty, Auchenlech, Auchtergaven, Auchtertool, Auchterarder, just over there beyond Dunning. Right? Now, these Gaelic place names came from the Scots as their influence spread from Argyll in the west in the 9th century. Before that, this area was Pictish. Right? Now, if you look at the map from Fife, north and east, you see a lot of Pictish place names. A lot of them start with the word pit, which means a parcel of land. And there's loads of them around Perth, Fife and Aberdeenshire. Pitlochry, Pitcairngreen, Pitroddy, Pittenweem. Aberdeen itself, that's Pictish. Aber is the word for the mouth of a river. So whilst the Gaels would use inner, as in Inverness, the Picts would have Aberdeen, Aberlemno, Aberfoyle, Abernethy. And just before you get to Auchterarder behind me is Aberuthven, where the Ruthven water flows into the River Erne and through the Strathearn into the Tay. Now here's something interesting, I think so. If you go south on the A9, you'll pass 3 wee villages in a row. Now, when I was a kid, the road actually went through these villages. Aberuthven, Auchterarder, I mentioned. But Blackford is where I stay. Now, I've got a theory about the Aberuthven, Auchterarder, then Blackford was the chronological order that these places were settled. And they track the story of Scotland. You see, Aberuthven has a Pictish name. And then the Scots, the Gaels from Argyll, brought their influence, and we got the Gaelic place name of Auchterarder. And finally, the English place name of Blackford. Now, I'm not an academic, it's just my theory, but living in Blackford, it's clear to me that Auchterarder is a bit in the past, and Aberuthven is proper backward. Village rivalry. Means nothing if you don't play darts. So when did all this happen? And why is this the heart of Scotland? In the 9th century, Scotland didn't exist. This was Pictland. But it's also where Scotland was born. To the west in Argyll, there was a kingdom of Gaelic-speaking Scots in what was called Dalriada. Now, they were bullied by the Picts, who were the big boys on the block. In my video, Scotland, how Scotland got its borders, which you should also watch, right? Link at the end, I told you about a battle in around 839 when most of the Pictish nobility, along with loads of Scots, were wiped out by Vikings. Now, into that vacuum came a guy called Kenneth MacAlpin, the first King of Scots. Now, this is a messy period of Scottish history. You see a plate of spaghetti bolognese, right? There's clumps of meat, aren't there? Right? But the meat's all minced up and crumbly. And there are stringy bits of spaghetti mixed in, and it's bound together with crushed tomatoes and oregano. And if you really want to get to grips with it, you need a fork and a spoon. That's what this period of Scottish history is like. If you want an academic read, then I suggest From Pickland to Alapa by Alex Wolff. But even he isn't sure whether Kenneth MacAlpin's takeover of Pickland was negotiated or disputed by conflict or marriage. So if you do read it, you're still going to need a fork and a spoon. What we do know is that after this Viking defeat, Kenneth became king of Dalriada over in Argyll. And 2 years later, that same Kenneth MacAlpin is recorded as the new king of Picts here. Now, a previous Pictish king, Rad, had made his base at Meagle. Now, that's on the other side of Perth, beyond Scone. And you can still visit the most important collection of Pictish stones in the world at the historic Scotland site in Meagle today. Please pay it a visit. But Kenneth made his base down here in Strathearn at a little village down there called Fertivia. Right? Today it's a tiny wee village, it's not even got a shop. But at the birth of Scotland, it was home to the royal palace, where every night they'd be dancing and feasting with spaghetti hoops for tea. Now, if the 840s was the time when Scotland began, then this valley is the place. We're told that 7 years into Kenneth's reign, he had the relics of St Columba taken from Iona in the Western Isles to protect them from Viking plunder. And they were brought to the new centre for the Celtic church of the new kingdom of Alapa. Now, the heart of the church was Dunkeld, just over the hills there, north of Perth behind me. Now, the Vikings hadn't gone away. They were taken over in the Western Isles. In Gaelic, the Western Isles are the Inch Gaul, the islands of the strangers. They even came to the heart of Kenneth's kingdom, where he defeated them at Dunkeld in 845. The Vikings were taken over in the north, but even the Britons to the west were getting a bit uppity, and they sacked Dunblane. It's just 20 miles from here. The new kingdom of Alapa was neither safe nor secure. And it was kind of constrained at this area round about Strathearn. Now, Kenneth died in his palace down in Fertivia, and his sons took over the family business. The Vikings came again and again. There are battles recorded at Dollar over the hill behind you to the south, at Scone over on the other side of Perth to the east. They sacked Dunkeld in North Perthshire and occupied for a time. And again they sacked Dunblane in the west. It wasn't until Kenneth's grandson, Constantine II, that the Vikings were finally defeated at the Battle of Strathearn in 904 AD. And it was this Constantine II who first brought together the Scots, the Church and the Crown at Scone a year later, on that hill of belief, where from that time on Scottish kings were inaugurated in that sacred place, seated on the stone of destiny. After many birth pangs and a difficult labour, Scotland was born. Now, it's worth pointing out that having survived the Vikings, Constantine II was the first Scottish king who had to battle against the new growing kingdom to the south, England. But having withstood the Viking threat, it was from this valley of kings, that Scotland spread out to become the land of Macbeth, of Wallace, Bruce, the Stuarts, and in the years of the Enlightenment would go on, if not to build, then certainly to mould the modern world. This is the heart of Scotland. Now, if you want to understand more about this period, then please watch my video about St Columba, the monk that made Scotland. You'll find it here. Also, how Scotland got its borders. You'll find that there. And of course, like this video and share it. Hamíonn Dóchas Gúm Bia Lam Alai. Cheerio, Rast.